I'm gonna be so real with y'all. I think that my TBR and I have some severe separation anxiety right now because I have deviated so far from my plan for this month. Welcome to A Little Bit of Monica. If you have been here before, you may be aware that I have started doing a mid-month check-in every single month to help me keep up with the reviews for the books that I've been reading and help me to keep track of the books that I have read throughout the month without having to remember every single book and its in-depth review by the time I get to the end of the month for my wrap-up. So this is my mid-month check-in for November, and I'm very excited to go into some of the books that I have read so far this month. I do feel like I'm off to a pretty good start, and I'm really happy with the quality of the books that I've been reading because so far, rating-wise, I think this may be my best month so far, and I'm very excited to share the books that I have been reading. I have one unfortunate review that I need to provide, and I'm gonna start with this one so that I can end on a super positive note. But the first book I have to talk about is one that I ended up DNFing, and I'm really disappointed by this DNF because this was a very highly anticipated release for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. This book was delayed in publication, finally came out in October, and I was so excited to get the first edition from Red Tower, Bloodguard by Ceci Robson, and I'm gonna be real with you, I did not have a good time with this. I ended up DNFing it at 30%. I feel like I have so many thoughts and also none at all because like I only made it 30% in. How can I possibly have so many thoughts? But let me get into a little bit of detail onto this book just to let you know what you may be getting into if you decide to read it. So this book is described as being a romantasy where the main character is a gladiator type of fighter and he goes into these gladiator fights, and there is a woman who basically is a healer and she ends up trying to help him. They both have their own ulterior motives for what they do, but she ends up helping him in these battles, like healing from them basically. And I only made it through I think 2 fights before I ended up quitting, so I don't really know what happens in the rest of the book. But here's the reason I DNF. By the 30% mark, I felt absolutely no chemistry between these two main characters. I felt no intensity. There was no draw. I feel like I was getting absolutely nothing from them. Individually, I didn't feel like I cared about either of their lives. I know his backstory was a little bit more interesting to me, but it was so secretive. Like there was so much that you were supposed to wonder about, and I'm like, no, I don't wonder about it anymore. I just want to know what's going on. I just want to feel some attachment to these characters, and I did not. The fact that they were supposed to be a romance in this book, by 30%, I was feeling nothing. I felt absolutely no connection to them as a couple, and in a lot of ways, I didn't even want them to be a couple because I thought they were kind of annoying, and like, that's not a good start for a book. I think the gladiator scenes were really fun, and especially the scene that happened kind of right before I DNF'd, it was definitely the most interesting part of the book, but it wasn't enough to carry it through when the base of this is supposed to be their relationship, and I didn't care about their relationship at all. Here is the other really big issue that I had, and obviously I DNF'd this completely separate from this, but very early on, I want to say it was maybe 10 to 15% of the way into the book, I ended up stopping listening to the audiobook. I have been very, very heavily relying on audiobooks lately to help me get through some of my books because they help me focus. I prefer to do audio and physical or ebook to have more of an immersive experience, and I was using the audiobook for the beginning of this. However, I had to stop because it was so terrible. It was distracting and it made me not care even more than I already didn't care. The male narrator sounded like he was trying to eat the microphone the entire time. It was so garbled and just it was so hard to understand. I had to slow the book down. I typically am listening between 2.5 and 3 times speed, depending on the app and how fast it lets me go. 3 times speed is my default speed, and for this one, I had to slow it down to 2.5, but the problem is that I only had to slow it down for the male narrator. The female narrator was fine. She didn't really give a lot of passion and like emotion in her voice, so I didn't feel captivated by her storytelling, but I didn't have any major issues with her. The problem is I would have had to slow it down and then speed it back up in order to keep the speed consistent for my own personal comprehension of the book, and that was just not working. I hated the audio so much that I stopped listening and was reading just with my eyeballs, and just with my eyeballs I still didn't like the story. So a very disappointing DNF because of how excited everybody was for this release. And I know there are some people who still liked it, but I know a lot of people who didn't like it or also DNF'd it because it was just giving nothing. It was not exciting, and I'm just really sad about it. So I will be definitely unhauling that one, unfortunately, even though the first edition is really pretty. Sprayed edges and a pretty first edition do not compensate for a not great story. So that one is done, but I am glad to be be through it, and I'm glad that I'm turning around some of these new books that I'm getting so that I know whether or not I actually like them and want to keep them on my shelves. But now we're moving on to the next couple of books that I read, and I think I'm going to go in order of rating for these books just because it's going to be kind of easy to put these all in an order, and you'll see why. So the next book I want to talk about is the book that was technically supposed to be finished in October, but I didn't finish it until the first couple of days of November. I was a little bit late on this, but I started a Stephen King book club and I have a Discord for it, and in October we were reading It together. Now, It is a very perfect story to be reading in October. All of the events happen around Halloween, and so it was the perfect fall spooky season Halloween book. However, it is so long, over 1,000 pages, and I did not get through it in the month of October. So I ended up finally finishing it within the first couple of days of November, and upon finishing this book, I feel like I had a lot of really complicated opinions and perspectives on this book, because for the most part, I do really think I liked it. I ended up landing on a 3-star rating, and I think 3 stars is a good rating. I mean, 3 stars is good in my opinion. I'm not saying this is a bad book, but this book could have been a lot shorter. I think the complication for me is that the story is constantly moving. Like, there's never a section of this book, a chapter or a portion of a chapter. It's all very fast moving. Everything is happening back to back to back. And I love that. It keeps the story feeling fast paced. The problem is that I had seen the movies before reading the book, and so I knew a lot of the story. Now, they're not identical. The original movie and the remakes, none of them are identical to the book. There are definitely deviances. However, I do think that having seen both movies, the originals and the remakes, it means that I already knew a lot of what was going to be happening in this book, and because of that, the tension and the mystery of what was going on was not there for me. And I think that's one of the strongest elements of this book is the characters not knowing what they're really dealing with, and as a reader, you experiencing the story from a perspective of not knowing what's going to happen. And because I did know a lot of the major events that were going to take place, I feel like the suspense was not there, and that's what I was really hoping for in this book. So that was kind of why this ended up being not a 5-star read for me, which I was really excited about because I know a lot of people who really love this book. And in our buddy read, a lot of people still had an incredible time and loved this book. There were 5 stars and there were 4-star ratings. For me personally, I could have given this book a 4-star rating, but there is a scene that happens near the end of the book that upon reading it, I genuinely want to know what's wrong with Stephen King and why he felt it necessary to put this scene in. It is a scene with the children. They are like 11 and 12 years old in this book, and there is a scene that happens after they defeat it the first time as children, and it's like, I cannot believe that it was in this book, and I don't want to like talk about it because it was definitely like the shock factor helped me get through reading it, but I'm gonna be honest, I almost stopped reading this portion of the book because it was so difficult to listen to, because I was listening to the audiobook and reading it with my eyeballs, and the full immersive experience for this scene was actually horrendous. For those of you who have read it, you know what I'm talking about, and you know how insane it is, and I just don't understand why it was necessary. I read a lot of horror. I read a lot of body horror, extreme horror, splatterpunk. Like, these extreme actions are not new to me. However, they usually have a reason for it, and this scene it just felt out of place. It felt unnecessary, and the like meaning behind the actions, I feel like you could have achieved that in so many other ways that were not as bizarre and frankly inappropriate. So that scene alone, that lowered my rating from 4 stars to 3 stars. But largely, this book was good, and I had a good time reading it. It took forever because of how long it is, but overall, I did really like the book, and I think it stands the test of time as far as the way that people can interpret this book and really like sit with some of the deeper meaning behind it. I am blown away by the depth that he is able to write, but I am so glad that I managed to get through it, even though I think I was the last person in my buddy read to finish. I finished after everybody else, but I did it. I finished it, and I'm just glad that I will never have to read it ever again because of how long it is. But that was the only other book this month that I read that was not a 5-star read. And I don't know how I accomplished that, but it's true. Every other book that I read so far this month has been a 5-star read, and that's quite a few more books to talk about. So let me get into it. First of all, I'm going to talk about all 3 of these together, but the last 3 books in Elsie Silver's Chestnut Springs series. This is Powerless, Reckless, and Hopeless. I gave all 3 of these 5 stars. I loved all of them. Can I pick a favorite? I don't know. I don't know if I can, because I loved all of them. At this point, I have given 4 of the 5 books in this series 5 stars. Flawless was the first one, and I gave it 4 stars. Thinking back, could I have given it 5? Maybe. And if I did a reread, would I give it 5? Probably. But in the moment, I gave it 4, and I have to live with that for now. But the rest of them were all 5 stars. I absolutely loved them. Powerless had a very different vibe to it, but I still ended up really liking the story and the depth that they had. And then Reckless just did something to me. I'm sorry, Theo. Reckless changed me. I obsessed. I don't know how to like comprehend life after that. And then Hopeless, I don't know. Hopeless really hit me in a surprising way. It was very, very deep and had a lot of trauma discussion, which I really value. And I just feel like that one surprised me so much that I ended up loving it even more than I could have imagined. So all 3 of these books, absolutely amazing. And I am so glad that I ended up reading these. This series was also a buddy read for my Discord. And now that we finished Chestnut Springs, we are going to be moving on to Elsie Silver's other books in the coming weeks. I'm not exactly sure when we're going to jump into the next one because people need a break, but I am so excited to be reading the rest of Elsie Silver's books because I absolutely love her writing. And hello, I am in my cowboy romance era. But we also have a couple other books to talk about. The first one is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is my second Emily Henry book, I think. The first one was People Meet on Vacation, and I gave this book 4 stars, but the longer I get away from that book, the more I think it was 3 stars for me. I did not like the timeline of that book. I just didn't care as much as I hoped I would. So I was a little bit nervous to go into another one, just not knowing what to expect. However, I heard really good things about Funny Story, and I have the really pretty Afterlight edition. So here I am. I loved this book so much. I gave this book 5 full stars and absolutely loved the chemistry and the connection between Miles and Daphne. This is a fake dating, exes getting together story that I absolutely loved and devoured so quickly. So Miles and Daphne both end up going through their own breakups, but it's because their exes were getting together. And so these two have a shared trauma in this relationship world. And so they end up becoming friends first, but they're also in a fake relationship for a couple different reasons. And then we get into the actual connection that they have, that we really learn how amazing of a person Miles is, but also just getting to appreciate them individually and also together. I loved this story, the setting, and all of the different dynamics that were going on. It was so much fun, and it was also just, I don't know, like something about this book, especially in comparison to People We Meet on Vacation, where the timeline was very like chaotic. That story, the timeline is jumping back and forth from like present day to past. And with this one, there is still a timeline movement, but it's all linear and there's no jumping back and forth to have to follow the time. And I just really appreciated that. So that is why this one ended up being a lot more successful for me. But like, I am an Emily Henry fan now. I can confidently say that I do intend on reading some of her other books just because I know how much I loved this one. It makes me very, very excited. And now I have 2 more books to talk about. Both of these are books by authors that I have loved every single thing I've read from them so far. So these books were not surprising 5 stars, but I'm still nonetheless very excited about them. The first one is Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This one is a Spotify audiobook original, and so this one I feel like a lot of people have had trouble getting to. If you did not check your Hoopla, that's where I got my audiobook to listen to for this. I don't have Spotify, so I was so excited when my Hoopla had it, and I was able to get through this super, super quick. I loved this story, very short. It is about 2 video game developers who are on a work retreat with a whole bunch of people, but they both think that each other have issues with each other and they can't work well together, but then they end up having drunken confessions, and it is like the most precious kind of story. I loved the chemistry and just like the quick turnaround of things. It made the story feel so fast moving, but also it was too short to have any sort of like third act breakup, which is like one of my least favorite things. So it was just amazing. Ali Hazelwood has never let me down, and this one is just another example of that. I loved this novella, and I kind of want to listen to it all over again because of how fun and cute it was. But because of how short that was, I don't have a whole lot more to say. So we're going to move right into the last book, and this is the most recent book that I have completed. And also, I have a very bold statement to make, and that is that I think this book may be my favorite romance book of the year. I don't know. It's definitely up there. It is definitely going to be in my top 5, but I'm gonna have to spend some time figuring out if this is going to be the top book of the year or top romance or whatever, however it fits into my rankings, but it is going to be very near the top. Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This book is not out yet. I had an arc of this and I am completely obsessed. Like, I can think of nothing else right now. I absolutely loved the characters. I loved the way that they were written. I loved the depth. I loved the settings. This story is a long distance relationship between a vet and a social media manager, and they both have some very significant issues going on in their lives and reasons why they cannot physically be together, and yet they transcend all of that space in such a beautiful way. This story is like the definition of dealing with the hard things in order to make the relationship work. They can see all of the reasons why the relationship shouldn't work, but their connection is so strong that they make it work anyway. And I think this is just something that I don't read typically, and it is so incredibly beautiful to be able to see such a wonderful portrayal of this kind of relationship. So often in books, whenever someone is going to be moving away, they're always like, oh, we can't make it work, we have to sacrifice things, and they either give up super quickly, or somebody has to give in and give up whatever they're doing in order to move with the other person. And while that is realistic in a lot of ways, I feel like this story is also very realistic from the other perspective, and getting to see the way that people really fight for what they know is true and honest love. And I loved it. I loved it so much. Their chemistry was immediate and also eternal, and both of them are just incredible characters who are going through so much, and they support each other through everything. I felt a very personal tie to Samantha, the female main character in this book, because of what she's going through on the side. She has a family member with dementia, and I have also experienced this kind of feeling of watching somebody deteriorate from dementia, and while it's definitely not on the same plane as this character, I was able to feel a lot of the same things and understand where a lot of it was coming from, and those, you know, side effects and things like that. And so one of the things I value so much about Abby Jimenez's books is that they always touch on something very serious and very intense, but in such a gentle and beautiful way. Helps you to feel for that character. Even if you don't know exactly what they're going through, you don't know anyone with that particular situation, you can feel their visceral pain and connect to them in a different way. I just love that about her book, and this book is no different. I truly think that I would love this book just as much, even if I didn't have the personal experience that I do to connect me to the story, but the way that she draws you in is just incredible. I am like, I'm running out of words. I feel like I don't even know how to like put into words exactly what I was feeling while reading this book. It did bring me to tears multiple times, but like sometimes it was tears of sadness and crying and grief for these characters, and other times it was tears of laughter, because I absolutely loved the way that these characters brought comedy in to help alleviate some of the stress in their lives, but not in a way that felt awkward or forced. I just loved this so much. Like, I loved this book, and I seriously cannot even come up with enough good things to say about it. Like, it is that good of a book. I honestly cannot wait for this book to be released. It comes out in April of next year, so still got a couple of months to wait, but I already pre-ordered it. I'm so excited to get this book. It is so good, and I cannot wait to reread it once it comes out because of how amazing it is. So I hope that this encourages you to read this book and pre-order it, and make sure you get it in your hands as soon as you can, because it is so freaking good. But that is all the books that I read so far this month. So I read 8 total books. I DNF'd 1, so I finished 7 books so far, which is a little slower than I had last month, but I'm still excited to see what the rest of the month is going to bring. I have some really big plans. My TBR is suffering a little bit because I have not read any of the arcs that I was planning on reading. I have not read any of the special edition books that I was planning on reading. The only thing I've accomplished from my actual TBR so far is Bloodguard, because of it being a new release that I wanted to get to, and the buddy read book for my Discord. That's it. Those are the only books that I've accomplished from my actual TBR. Everything else was like, maybe I should read this now. Which is like, great, because I'm having a great time, but my plans are out the window. So I need to go catch up with that and get into some of my special editions, which I do have some immediate plans to do very soon. But that's all I've got for this mid-month check-in. Please let me know your thoughts on any of these books. If you loved them as much as I did, I love to talk about it in the comments, so please let me know your thoughts. If you liked watching this video and you want to see more updates from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with everything that I've got going on. If you want to join my Discord for buddy reads, reads. We have a new Stephen King book that we are reading every single month, and I also just add in some random other buddy reads as I go, like Elsie Silver books. I'm reading the Saba Tahir series. Eventually I'll be moving on to book 2 when I get the time, but I just am adding in all these books that I want to be reading and letting other people know so they can read along with me. If that interests you, the link is in the description so you can join that as well. We have a great time, and we are also loving watching some of the Stephen King movies as we are reading the books, so that's a great time as well. I want to thank you so much for watching this video and continuing to support me, and I really hope that I will see you in the next video. Bye!